Hello, this talk is designed to help parents support their children as they make the transition from education into employment. Many parents assume that they can rely on the careers provision within education to support their child, although this talk will show that this doesn't always meet the best interests of your young person. My name is Nick Palmer and I've been studying this career system for 20 years since I passed through this way as a student. I was underwhelmed by the system at the time, and now, as an employer, I'm even more underwhelmed by how badly it prepares people for employment. My company Bizenko addresses the issues at hand here through the provision of seminars, one-to-one coaching and e-learning. Let's start by taking a look at this image behind me. It's an image to illustrate the journey that we all take as we move from education on the left into employment on the right. The illustration shows that it's something of a lottery, something of a hit and hope as to whether people actually get the right job for their circumstance. Sadly, the focus on the system is all about applying for academic courses and applying to jobs, and not about the work skills that give young people credibility as candidates, the skills that they will need for the duration of their career. The system concentrates on CV writing and interview skills, and not on commercial awareness. The system worries about how jobs are allocated rather than why jobs are allocated. There are two unwritten assumptions about this system as it stands. The first is that a qualification with a good CV and good interview technique will result in a job. And the second assumption is that once you have a job, a good career will evolve naturally. I don't think either of these things are true in real life, but they are the foundation of much of the careers provision out there. If I listed all of the facts and evidence that I think justify this opinion that this system doesn't support your child, we could be here for hours. Instead, I'll supply a highlight of that information now, and then if you'd like to read some more, please visit the Bizenko website. Just how bad is this situation? On the slide here, you'll see information from a company called Milkround, who in 2015 conducted a student and graduate career satisfaction survey. You can see that 6 months after graduation, only 12.6% of graduates had a graduate level job. 46.7% of graduates were working in regular employment. In other words, a job that didn't need a degree. They were underemployed. And 31.6% of graduates were still looking for a job 6 months after graduation. Young people don't get told these statistics at the point of application. In 2015, the CBI, Confederation of British Industries and Employers Organisation, and Pearson ran a survey about education and skills. They found that 66% of employers were not satisfied by levels of business awareness amongst school and college leavers. They found that 54% of employers were not satisfied by levels of business awareness amongst graduates. From the same survey the previous year, 80% of employers thought the quality of careers advice was not good enough to enable students to make informed career decisions. What do young people think of this system? Well, as we can see on the screen, 66% of university leavers say they regret accepting a job offer as soon as they start in the job, and 25% of them subsequently leave their first jobs within 12 months. 68% of students feel that 16 is too early to be making choices which will define their future career path, and yet that's the system in which we expect young people to build the foundations for their career. It seems that there are quite a few people who aren't happy with this system. The unfortunate irony is that lots of employers tell us that they don't actually value academic qualifications to the extent that young people imagine. They only use academic qualifications as a filter for recruitment because there's nothing else. I know this because nearly 200 employers have signed a petition on our website encouraging young people to develop their commercial awareness skills alongside their academic skills. Some large employers, PwC and Deloitte, have stopped using academic credentials as a filter for recruitment because it's not proven to be effective in determining suitability for work or the right candidate for the vacancies. Employers want individuals to understand their customers. They want employees to interact with different stakeholders. And the evidence suggests that these qualities are not necessarily found in a higher concentration amongst those people who do well at exams. Exams are still really important. Please don't misunderstand this point. It's just that employers look for something extra when they're talking about who they would appoint to a vacancy. Another challenge for young people is that they don't know enough about the companies who will likely employ them. As the illustration shows, there's no visibility between the students and pupils on the left and the employers on the right, especially the SME employers. Small, medium-sized enterprises will employ 60% of the workforce, and yet they don't ever get to meet. How would you know anything about the other party if you never get to meet? For many young people, applying for a job is like going on a blind date. It's something of a lottery. If a date goes wrong, you can recover pretty quickly, but if a job goes wrong, it can take more time to recover. It can take time for a person to recover their confidence and their reputation if a job goes wrong. In my opinion, there are two main problems with this system. The first problem is that the focus is almost exclusively on the application process. There's no long-term view, which you might expect from the use of a word like career. And secondly, the system doesn't really allow for sufficient growth or personal development. Whilst a young person is locked in a period of application, they aren't actually learning anything new. For many young people, it's a catch-22 situation. They can't get a job without experience, and they can't get the experience without a job. Many of them tell me that they can't see a way that they will get any job, let alone a career. Young people especially hate it when they make applications to a job but never hear anything back from the employer in terms of a feedback or a reply. Recruitment teams typically can have hundreds of applications for each vacancy, and they don't need to reply to everybody in order to do their job correctly, and so they don't. If a young person gets stuck in this cycle of failed applications, they can begin to stagnate. They're not learning anything new, and the process doesn't achieve anything constructive for them. If you treated an animal to this level of monotony, false promise, and mental torture, you'd probably get yourself arrested, and yet we allow our young people to go through it every year. In 2014, the Prince's Trust did some research that found that 40% of young people had faced symptoms of mental illness as a result of being out of work, and it's largely because of this system. So it seems that a good CV might get you into the interview room, but it's commercial awareness that gets you a job offer, according to the employers. And yet this isn't taught in school. It's not on the national curriculum, so teachers and therefore pupils don't take it seriously. I speak to lots of young people who simply don't know enough about what employers do. They exist in an environment that says that qualification plus good CV and interview equals job. They don't know what they don't know. This is where parents can really help their children. Parents remain the most trusted advisors for most young people, and importantly, they don't have the conflicts of interest that most schools and universities do. Naturally, you could say that I have a bias here, I have a vested interest, and I do. But I think if we align my vested interest with your vested interest and the vested interest of your child, then we can do better for your young child than this system. The interests of schools and universities are to do with funding and league tables, and the interests of employers are to do with finding the best talent for the least cost. They simply aren't aligned either with each other or with the best interests of your child. To prove this point about misaligned interests, let me read you some comments that I found from different stakeholders in this system whilst I was researching this company. I spoke to a number of employers. The first said to me, "Why would we invest anything to train young people who we won't employ?" It's a good question. I don't know the answer. The second employer said, "I don't need to spend anything on training. I get more applications than I know what to do with. My job is to filter most of them out so I can produce a workable shortlist." A third employer said, "We need help recruiting work-ready apprentices because we can't find them ourselves, but it's not a good time right now because of the milk price in Russia." This employer is not being difficult. They're trying to help, but they illustrate the point that for most employers, their primary concern is their business. How do they make money? How do they exist? It's very much a secondary concern getting apprentices work ready. For the employers, that's something that they expect to happen elsewhere. I spoke to a number of people within the education system as well. Here's what one school teacher told me. If we told pupils that employers on your petition weren't fussed about academics, they'd assume there was no point in school and the pupils wouldn't turn up. A second teacher said, I need those pupils to come into my sixth form, otherwise I lose funding. So I can't afford to introduce them to employers at all. A third teacher said, we no longer run work experience as it became too difficult and too costly. A fourth teacher told me, we didn't send any year 13s to the careers fair because the students have got mock exams next week. At this career fair in question, one of the largest regional employers was offering guaranteed employment for 5 years with a sponsored degree. And yet, because that school needed to protect their exam league table performance, none of the year 13 pupils were able to meet this company and take advantage of a fantastic employment opportunity. I've also spoken to a number of politicians at local and national level. When asked what young people in his city thought about career services, a local government civil servant told me, I work on a more strategic level in the education and employment space. This guy's job title was Youth Education and Employment. So I asked him again, yeah, but what do the young people say? And he told me, well, I don't actually talk to young people directly. Brilliant. How can you help young people if you don't know what they say about their own situation? The government have published a Skills for Sustainable Growth strategy in which they explain that they see the individual job seeker having shared responsibility for investments into training alongside the government and alongside employers. In other words, the individual must expect to invest in themselves. We'll see how this plays out in a minute, but it's vital to understand as early as possible in your career planning. By the way, I'm not being critical of the people I've just quoted. I'm just pointing out that they have interests and measurements and metrics, which means that they don't always have your child's career progression as a primary consideration to do their job well. The chairman of the Education Select Committee, when reviewing the careers provision in 2015, noted that whilst there were some schools doing great work, it wouldn't be possible to improve the whole system until these conflicts within education were resolved. Okay, so enough about the problems. What about a way forward? The gentleman on the screen behind me is Professor Mike Campbell. He advises governments and international organisations like the OECD, the United Nations and the World Bank on the issue of employment skills. In an interview with Bizenko, Professor Campbell explains the difference between generic work skills and job-specific skills. And he explains that the skills that employers will only ever invest in are the job-specific skills from which they benefit. In other words, the individual is left to invest in their own development with the generic work skills because nobody else will. This is the point that people who find it easy to get a job straight out of education need to pay attention to, because even if you do have a great first job, you'll need this generic work skill to support your career through time. Bizenko just completed a survey of 1,000 parents of young people aged between 16 and 23. Only 33% of parents thought that the individual had any responsibility for the development of their own career. But wait a minute, governments and employers tell us that they're not going to pay for this development, and yet no one seems to have told the young people or their parents. At least if they have, only 33% of the parents have understood the message. But there is some hope. We might not know what the jobs of tomorrow look like, but we do know how they will be funded and measured. And my personal belief is that if you teach these commercial skills and habits, you allow the young people to take control of their own destiny. Fortunately, it's not just me who thinks so. I'm about to show you a video from a man called Ray Piggott. Ray started his career as an apprentice in heavy engineering and ended up as the CEO of a multinational company. He's experienced the whole range of career development, and he's even written a book about how to make people better prepared for employment.
Hello, I'm Ray Piggott. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. I left school at the age of 17 following a state education. I did not go to university, and I signed up for an apprenticeship in heavy engineering. At the other end of my career, I was chairman and chief executive of a telecommunications company with a turnover of £165 million with 2,000 employees and 55 offices around the world and 5 factories. In between times, I conducted business in many countries in the world, and as a result learned at first hand how business is conducted in those countries. The most notable one, of course, being North America. What I discovered was that British engineers and British workers have all of the talents to compete with these other countries, perhaps more so in many, but do not yet take on board the commercial aspect that's necessary to be successful in today's very, very competitive world. Why is this commercial dimension to our career important? You know, it's very tempting to do the job that our employer has employed us to do and to do no other. You do your job on a very narrow front the company's asked you to do, and you can probably do that for quite a considerable period. You're then doing what the company wants and the company's pleased, which is good for the company. But what has it done for you? It means you're operating your career on a very narrow front, and you will at one day become vulnerable because technology will move on or the company will move on and you are still left. You've not added to your skill set. So in your own long-term career interests, you need to add other dimensions to your basic skill set. What do these other departments in the firm do? What does HR do? What does marketing do? What does sales do? What does technical support do? What do all these different people do? The more you arm yourself with the knowledge of what they do, then the more valuable you are to the company that employs you, and perhaps more importantly, the more valuable you are to yourself when you want to go out onto a wider marketplace.
Okay, so hopefully that video begins to ring some alarm bells for people who've come through an education system that delivers them to a point of narrow academic specialism. If an individual is to build a job and career, then that individual needs to understand this point about broader generic work skills. And they also need to understand that they are the main driver and main funder for that development. Even if they have a perfect job straight out of education, they'll never know when that job or when that employer will become vulnerable. Professor Campbell and Ray Piggott both are clear that this issue affects everybody in every job in every industry sector. Charities, not-for-profits, government, as well as companies that are profit-making. Every job is affected by these commercial skills, and therefore every individual needs to understand how to manage them. So what are these generic skills? Sometimes they're called employability skills, and there's a list on the slide behind me from a definition by the Confederation of British Industry. There's no standard definition as to what employability skills are, but given that the CBI are employers, let's go with employers because they decide who gets the job. If you look at the list, most of the items are pretty obvious. A lot of young people will be used to filling in application forms where they give examples of having used these skills. What Bizenko does is uses these examples in a variety of work contexts, which is something that young people probably don't have access to. Let's take an example from the list, communication. It's something we all do from an early age, but is that enough to guarantee us a job? No. On the screen behind me, Liam Gallagher is giving a very clear and confident communication signal. But I think we can agree that in most customer-facing roles, this kind of communication is not desirable. But what should good communication look like in the workplace? What should it sound like? That's the information that Bizenko helps young people to understand. One exercise that we do with our seminar delegates is a communication and listening exercise. I first did the exercise at Cambridge University. The room was full of the brightest people in their generation, and yet out of 40 individuals, not one of them were able to complete the exercise correctly. I repeated the exercise last year at the Jobs Centre in York, and out of 25 long-term unemployed individuals, 4 of them did complete the exercise correctly. This illustrates the point from our employer's petition. It's possible to have academic ability, but not have the skills that employers need. The skills that employers need happen to be in greater concentration in a room full of people who employers typically would go to last to find and fill a vacancy. The communication exercise we use demonstrates that finding, securing and enjoying a job is an ongoing negotiation throughout your career. Sadly, in this careers system, nobody learns that. They only learn the process of how to apply, and they assume that a career will evolve once a job has been secured. However, to be successful, Young people need to understand the why jobs are allocated, not just the how. Professor Campbell and Ray Piggott are both talking about the why jobs are allocated. Collectively, we waste years of time and millions of pounds trying to squeeze people through this 19th century model of job application. It's a lottery. It's apply and hope. It's blind dating. It's not working. It's not good enough for your child, and I don't even know your child. To give you an illustration of how outdated this thinking is, the main document of exchange has a Latin name. I don't mean to surprise you, but nobody actually speaks Latin anymore. Okay, so how can Bizenko help your child? I hope I've demonstrated that I know and care about your child's situation. I walked in their shoes 20 years ago, and I've been an employer and a hiring manager ever since, and I'm haunted by how inefficient this system is to prepare people for employment. I've managed teams of over 100 people in 10 countries around the world. I read government reports into this issue so that you as parents don't have to. I know what I'm talking about. I've been trained by the Institute of Leadership and Management to coach young people through this transition. The point about Bizenko is that we give our delegates examples and explanations that give them greater confidence in purpose. Our delegates become more credible as candidates as a result. We can't guarantee anybody a job, but I can help people to become better candidates in the equivalent time that they might otherwise have rewritten their CV 30 times in this system. Everything that we do is about training the individual to grow and learn. Our delegates might not use everything we teach them within a week, but they'll use all of it over time, and they'll use lots of it each year of their career. In other words, what we do is career support, the long-term stuff, not just the immediate panic that's involved in trying to secure a first job. If you'd like to learn more about our one-to-one coaching or our seminars, please visit the Bizenko website, www.bizenko.co.uk. You'll notice that we're running a crowdfunding campaign right now, and the best rates for our seminars and our coaching are available as rewards through that crowdfunding campaign. If you're an employer and you've liked what you've seen in this talk, please also visit the website and sign our employer's petition, and also, if you're able, donate to the crowdfunding campaign. Many of the young people we work with have already left education and they need this help, but by definition, because they're unemployed, they can't afford it themselves. We have a social enterprise company, a sister company that delivers this training, and with your donations we're able to make that happen. If you're an employer and you've liked what you've heard and seen, please also visit our website. Our sister company, Bizenko Social Enterprise, delivers this training and coaching for unemployed people who've already left education. By definition, as unemployed people, they're not able to access this kind of training and they can't fund it themselves. But with your donations as employers, we are able to help them. Thank you. I'd like to leave you with a testimonial from one of our delegates who happens to have been in Year 12. It pretty much sums up both the need for this training and also the appreciation that the young person felt. They said, "Of all the events I've had to go to at school, this has been the most worthwhile." Thank you.